have with us Professor Dr. Ammourah, who's a Vice Dean and Director, Center for Middle East Studies in the Jindal School of International Affairs, OP Jindal University. He holds a doctorate in Linguistics and Translation of Political Discourse, the Arabic-English context from JNU, and a Master of Arts in Linguistics and Translation from Bath University, UK, a certificate in Diplomacy and International Relations, International Politics, International Trade and Finance, International Law from Oxford University, Queen Elizabeth House. Professor has served as a career diplomat at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the Syrian Arab Republic for more than 33 years. In his capacity as a deputy to the foreign minister, he was in charge of the political, economic, and cultural relations between Syria and 48 countries in Europe. Professor has written more than 40 articles in the local newspapers and magazines on the current events in West Asia, and he has also authored 4 books. Welcoming you, Professor.
Thank you.
We have with us Dr. Deevashu Shrivastava, who is the head of Jagran School of Public Policy and International Relations from Jagran Lakecity University, Bhopal. He's a young academician, having cleared the UGC NET in law twice and also MP Set. He has completed his PhD in intellectual property laws from Baraktullah University, Bhopal in 2018. And since 2012, he has been in the academics. He holds a diploma in cyber law, diploma in medical law, diploma in news media law, and drone laws. He has to his credentials 22 paper publications and 18 paper presentations in various reputed international and national conferences. He is on the advisory board of various legal platforms, very active in terms of the moot court experience. He's also been awarded the Outstanding Performer of the Year for 2015 and 16. He's been facilitated with the prestigious Excellence in Research Award in 2018 and Best Faculty in Law Award in 2019. Dr. Shrivastava is the founding head of the Jagran School of Public Policy and International Affairs, the first and only dedicated school on public policy in Central India. Welcoming you, Dr. Shrivastava. We also have with us Ms. Shilpa Singh, who is the leading life coach and skills trainer from Mindler. Having 22 years of experience in career guidance, life coaching, HR management, and teacher training, Shilpa brings in a holistic purview of the entire education and skill building spectrum, from schools to organizations. She has a strong foundation in people management skills and holds a master's degree in psychology. Her expertise ranges from schools to business sectors, passionately delivering career workshops to hundreds of students and professionals. Welcoming you, Shilpa ma'am.
Thank you so much, Soumya.
All right. Just a quick announcement. So there's an opportunity for all the students here. The student, just keep asking relevant questions in the chat, and the student with the most relevant question will be given a free one-on-one career session by Mindler. So post the webinar, we'll contact you and you will be given the free session. Over to you, Shilpa.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. After the introductions, I have realized I am the least qualified person on the panel. And so I must make sure that I am asking the right questions today, both to Dr. Shrivastava as well as to Dr. Ammourah for joining us. He's joining in from Syria, actually. So he's actually logged in. We have an international joining in today. And that's what I'm really excited about. When we talk about public policy, we talk about diplomacy. It is such a wide area in terms of just the confluence of all the different areas and different types of work that can come into it. And I was sharing that earlier when Soumya and we were talking earlier that I've kind of lived the life of a foreign service brat. I've grown up in different parts of the world. And at that point of time, it was a really scary situation because every 3 years I was a new kid in school. But you do end up with this extremely amazing global viewpoint, and I think that's one of the two things that whether it comes to diplomacy or it comes to public pol, that global viewpoint is what is the binding factor for them, right? And in the world that we live in today, we are looking at one in which we are very closely connected. One pandemic has shut down the entire world. We've realized how seemingly without our realizing how interconnected our economies are, our cultures are, and what that means for us. So I do want to be able to, what I will be doing is asking both of our panelists the questions and giving you both a chance to be able to answer. So I'd like to be able to get your understanding on two things. One, from your opinion, um, the similarities and the differences that exist within looking at something that is like international affairs or diplomacy and public policy. So if you could just in your mind share with me, what do you see as the similarities and what do you see as the differences when it comes to that? So that would be something that I would like to go ahead and start off with. Dr. Amroha, would you like to be able to start if you're all right with that?
I'm fine with that. It's no problem. You know, public diplomacy and public diplomacy have one thing in common, that is public. And and also when we say public policy, it seems that it is more interested in, concerned with the system of laws, norms, values, regularity measures, courses of action that the state or government takes, and so on, and finding priorities. So every country in the world definitely has a strategy for governance, and that governance is to deal basically with the human being, with the social, and here lies the complexity of this interrelationship between the government and the individuals. And because in the world, there are different cultures, different thinking, different world. So heterogeneous cultures and systems create heterogeneous political systems in that way. So that is when we speak about public policy also, it is not only confined into the domestic affairs of a state within its borders, etc., but also it goes beyond that because the world, as you rightly said, is interconnected, particularly nowadays in this globalized world. Nilly-willy, whether we want it or not, we have to hear what others say. But the problem lies in us that do we have to believe what they say all, or do we have to think of them as angels or as devils? To me, as I could notice, what is happening now in Africa, in the Middle East, the world over, those who are having that high media technology, monopolize it, are determining what they want from the world and from this new generation. They are changing their concepts, their belief, their traditions through what is called public diplomacy. And the public diplomacy takes various multifaceted forms from culture to sports to medicines to media now is degrading, social media is degrading democracy. In what sense? Because when you are bombarded by hundreds of channels, especially in this, who are they? Who are behind them? Who finance them? What aims they want? Can they say, for example, if you listen to Al Jazeera, Al Arabiya, uh, etc., they have certain orientations, but the location, the headquarters of all those channels, I can frankly say they do not say a word in criticism of the country they are staying in, or either those who finance them. So media make idols to, to adore or devils to abhor. And that means it, you know, the social media and the public diplomacy that is to embellish the image of the financer is, for example, a journalist or a presenter. Is he like a camera? If he wants to, uh, project a certain image of another country, whether that country is an ally or a rival or a
Right.
competitor, that takes the photo as it is? No, he's a human being. He has his ideology, he has his passion, his feelings, his emotions. So in here lies the real study of what is behind the news. Naomi Chomsky and others have written a quite very interesting books about uh, this. I can tell you from my experience, when Arab Spring events, for example, started in West Asia, allow me to say West Asia, because this is the true, you know, political term to describe this part of the world.
Yeah.
And incidentally, it is an Indian term and shows the neutrality of Indian politicians over time by saying West Asia and not Middle East.
Mm.
Because if you say Middle East, it's a political term, economic terms, devised by the American and the British and so on. So when this Arab Spring events started, you can see 80 foreign channels.
Yeah.
And these 80 foreign channels financed by a group of countries, the Western world, GCC countries, because there is a strategy, they have a strategy and public diplomacy in the external affairs. And that strategy was outsourced and was declared by George W. Bush when the Anglo-American War against Iraq. He said, our aim is to reshape the politics of the Middle East, to make Iraq as a model for the whole Middle East. Now, give you some events. There was on this media, there was what is called eyewitness, which means, yes, you are an eyewitness. Come and give me an interview and I pay you $500. Oh, that's quite, very interesting. But the same voice, the same man, let's say he is in Haryana now, and he was an eyewitness for an incident that happened. But this same man, and after half an hour, he gives an interview to another channel and takes $1,000, but he say this an incident that happened in New Delhi. Now, a rational man would realize that this is fake news. So this fake news, but unfortunately, all the 80 channels, the 100 channels, repeat the same thing. And it starts to become a focus being planted in the mind of the young generation and in the, people who do not know the truth. So truth is becoming false, and the false is becoming a truth. So there is lying, there is deception, there is public opinion is misled. I read the book by John J. Mearsheimer's Why Leaders Lie, and lying in international politics. There are. So the world is repeating itself.
Yeah, that's
But
true.
this high tech is becoming, the revolution of communication has, of course, pros and cons. But imagine now this same technology that is used by honest people to convey the truth, to project the truth, is being by the terrorists, again, for recruitment and so on. So there is a big responsibility on students of international affairs, students studying public policy, public diplomacy, global affairs, to be, to wake up, to see, no, I don't believe what I see, what I hear. Let me see it first, but not only let me see it, let me feel it, let me touch it, let me see, and then my mind will decide. So there is globalization has also negative impacts on the invasion of the culture of the people and the understanding of the people. So this is very interesting to study, very interesting to follow up. And that is, I believe that, repeat saying, not, to give also room for my colleagues and friends to study public diplomacy and public policy have common things. One is a strategy, and the other is an implementation. And that implementation, the public diplomacy, takes many tracks.
Yeah.
The worst ever in the 21st century is the economic diplomacy when we come to the issue of sanctions, unilateral sanctions, illegal sanctions, apart from the Charter of the United Nations and also international law. I will stop here by saying, and then we can see about what are the global affairs that the world is facing.
Thank you so much. That was very insightful. So, before I have Dr. Shrivastava speak, one of the things that's come to me is, as students, there is a huge responsibility that lies with you to be able to actually challenge your biases and to be critically being able to approach whatever it is that you're studying and looking at. So, Dr. Shrivastava, same. My question is stands. What are you, if you could share your thoughts with me, please?
Yeah, thank you so much, Shilpa ma'am, for the same. And before I moved, I would compliment to what Dr. Ammourah said, that and that has been something which has been there. So taking to what he said, I'm not repeat the same thing, that yes, public has been a common thing, whichever country, whichever ideology we follow, whichever political connect that we follow across. What I personally also believe is the similarity of policy. Now, policy, when we see whether it's a very local issue, whether it's a domestic issue, whether it's a state issue, or we call it to be a federal issue or a central issue or an international issue. So I'll take a couple of instances to what Dr. Ammourah mentioned for the Middle East example, that X country at that time was a dominating country, utilized their power of media and then taking it across. I was reading this article when I came across the former US president. I'm not taking names. The former US president said that it is because of me that the 3 billionaires are able to get into space. Now, I'll come to that particular thing that we all can relate. Who can that former president can be across? But that is where the power of the policy comes into play. Now, whatever we are making, whatever for a local issue, for an international issue, and again, I'm bargaining from what Dr. Ammourah mentioned across was the implementation part of it. So it is the issues which are majorly at a national fronts or at an international fronts, which we generally call it as global. And that is how the policy and the public, because these policies are made for the public. Now, this public can be the one with it inside. Issues like refugees, issues like illegal migrants. Now, there is a very thin line difference between the two. And sir rightly mentioned across that particular point. But we have a different policy. The UN conventions are different for refugees and for illegal migrants. Now, the policies, how they are made for, how they are gifted, and how they are put across is also taken into consideration. Implementation differs from person to person. And when I call it person to a person with a different ideology or a different political connect would lead that policy and its implementation in a different way. And a person 5 years of his tenure or 6 years of his tenure changes across. We have a different set of person, we have a different ideology of a political party coming in, they would implement it in a different way. So therefore, the policies or the diplomacy, as we're talking about, is again something. I have been saying this as a faculty for public policy, more towards what the legal side was. Article 19(1) is the right to freedom of speech and expression, as to what sir mentioned across very categorically. And then we always read 19.2 as a restriction to the same, that it's not an absolute right that somebody can utilize it. In a similar way, the policies are there with the limitations as well, and how they are implemented. And I totally agree when you beautifully intermingle in between by calling that these students should be free of their biasness. Because when they are into these steps, or when they are the future policymakers or the young policymakers, as I have been calling them, they have to be free of those biases. They have to think what would be and who are the impacted people for whom that particular thing. And I guess that's where the policy starts on. The policy starts from the basic question: who is the person who's getting impact? What would be their thing? I'll give you a small example. A PDS scheme, that is a ration scheme for the people in India, has to be implemented, and it has to be linked with the DBT, that is a direct benefit transfer, through their Aadhaars. So the problem at the first front is they are not literate, they are not able to get it in Aadhaar. And that's where a UIDI came across, that we have the fingerprints and the iris correction, irrespective whether they'll have a signature or not, because something mandated for the bank accounts. And then linking that Aadhaar to something was the implementation of that particular policy. And we all know what the rest was history. So yeah. Shilpa ma'am, just to confine to your answer, according to me, yes, I'll agree with Professor Ammourah that yes, public was one of those particular things. I also believe that a good written thing on backing of it would also be important, to which I call it as a policy.
Wonderful, thank you. So we are looking at an element. First is about addressing our bias, being able to be critical in what we're approaching in, so far that I've understood, when we're looking at either a career in diplomacy or we're looking at a career in public policy. And we're also looking at an element of where we are looking at being able to look from the long-term perspective of whatever I work on today, who is going to be what is it going to impact in the long run? So whether it is something to do with migrants, or it has to do with refugees, or it has to do with my borders or sanctions or anything else, these are elements that have to be thought through. So one of the key requirements, therefore, from my understanding, is both the careers require not a medium to a short-term view, but a very long-term view, because you have to think at least 20 years ahead. What you put into play today will be playing out much later as well. So, okay, great. So when we're looking at possible areas of study, so there's a lot of thought given to, and both of you can just tell me with a yes or no, or share some information. A lot of people believe that in order for you to be able to get involved in public policy or to get involved in diplomacy, inherently you need to be from the humanities. That if you do not have an understanding of political science and history, etc., you're not going to be able to do well in these areas. Your thoughts? Do you think that that's the only thing that's available? Like if I'm a student of the sciences or commerce, will I still be able to make it if I want to look at international relations or diplomacy or public policy? Deevashu, I think you're wanting to say something immediately.
Yeah. The only thing that I'll say that I totally disagree, and that's totally isn't in bold, where I'm trying to make this point that, look, I'll give small examples, and then I guess each one of us can relate it with it. We see that the Prime Minister of our country visits many countries, and when he doesn't go alone. It's a contingent that he carries, which includes businessmen, which includes former sportspersons, which includes economists, which includes health specialists, and which includes things across. So now for me, when I see a student of commerce, when I see a student of arts, when I see a student of science, I am seeing a potential policymaker in them. Because somebody who is having a good office chemistry and biology can be a good person. And this pandemic time has taught us that, look how the vaccines got evolved. And when we were having no vaccines to the stages of trials, then how pharmacy took place, we had experts from pharmacy and they took ahead. This was a policy in pharmacy. Now, the similar guy couldn't be a good person when it comes to the sports policy. India is supporting Afghanistan cricket. Afghanistan, a country that was very worstly affected with something that shouldn't have been there. But how Indian cricket team or the BCCI on that particular point supported, they required a policy and they posted that thing, which developed the friendly relations with those particular countries. We saw that this exchange of vaccines was made to many countries, and this includes many. And that's where I'm coming across that policy was made at the back end, that irrespective of what are there, India turned out to be a super friendly power to all the fellow world countries. In the similar pattern, if I have an economist or a person who is very good at economics in his 11th, 12th, can be a good economic person. We see the Niti Aayog full of economic people there. We see all the MNCs with have a dedicated department on public policy. Be it so it's Amazon, be it so it's Flipkart, be it so it's Virgin Airways, whatsoever we are talking about. Now, these are the people experts in this particular areas. For that matter, we have the startups like Swiggy, we have startups like Zomato. They have a public policy domain. There has a public policy domain which is headed by someone who is from a legal background, who has been herself to be in the part of the your United Nations. She was a part of the United Nations Women Program for the Middle East as well as in the states of Africa. Now, what has been there? So it is more towards how you present and which area of domain you have. So I have always saying this, that a good chef cannot be a good cricketer. A good cricketer cannot be a good academician, and a good academician can never be a good driver. And we are not taking all these things together. It's all in isolation, where policy and diplomacy. So diplomacy is not just one room affair or a one person affair that we generally see across. It is an affair which involves, and which is just like I have always called it as a box of grapes, where each grape is something resembling us, that these are the particular domains. So yes, public policy, diplomacy, and other things are one particular aim which any specific person, any specific student of any stream, and I can also take this step ahead. It's not necessary that a political science or a background within a foreign thing can be there. It can be of advantage. That's not a deniable point, but that is not an essential that has to be taken across. It's a basic understanding that has to be taken. I have always been a person that, and I've always been a teacher of that sort, that a student should be a good reader. If you're not a good reader, you're not a good implementer in any way. And that's where a good reading of your own subject can be something which you can make, which can make you a good policy maker, both at a national and when it goes to an international level as a good global diplomacy. So this would be my submission to that thing, and I can move to you, Shilpa.
Lovely. Dr. Ammourah, what do you think? Do I need to have a particular educational background to get into diplomacy?
Well, I will try also to elaborate more on, this public diplomacy policy and public diplomacy. Just let me tell you how this similarity that I will try to. We have a businessman or a trader. A trader, in the end of the day, he will make one deal, win, gain, and he doesn't care what will be the impact.
Yeah.
The question here is, can he do another deal in the same way? Is he interested? There is a kind of mechanism and interaction. But the difference between a trader and investor, entrepreneur, who invests for the future, for continuity. So in this way, politics in this sense is to design how to gain, but not how to let others gain in a strategy, whereby the other country will do the same counter strategy, but that doesn't work. So we need a kind of a marriage between the minds in a diplomatic interaction, which has its own rules and regulation, practice, and the procedures. As Dr. Deevashu has said, like a bunch of grapes. Yes, everything is connected to it.
Right.
So we include, now we are in this specificity of the title foreign policy and diplomacy, for example, that is going intermingled together as moving from the general, which we have to know it, the rules, but to more specific of the implementation itself. And this implementation of a certain policy, foreign policy, which is definitely foreign policy, decision makers, when they decide, formulate their foreign policy, they take into consideration their internal domestic, affairs, capacity, resources, allies, enemies, foes, competitors, and all the lot. So we are moving here into the statecraft of how to implement what is possible. So diplomacy is the implementation and achievement of what is possible in a peaceful way, through dialogue, through, negotiation, bargaining. But we have to be careful. T.C. Chilling said, to avoid war, we have to use diplomacy. But there is no way but bargaining. And bargaining is diplomacy. It is vicious diplomacy, but diplomacy. And because of it is being vicious, everyone is vicious. And that's why I have to understand what is in the back mind of my, who is sitting across the table, what he has in mind. And to read and analyze his capacity, his possibility, his real intention, and how to maneuver. Kissinger has been described as the fox of diplomacy, etc. And by the way, I had a chance back in 1974 to translate to him when he came for this disengagement of forces. So diplomacy is really important. To me, decision makers, they design their policy, but they cannot design that policy unless they analyze the data. And the data comes from also diplomatic analysis of behavior, of a practice, of a statement, and so on. So this field of study, which is foreign policy and diplomacy, is becoming more important, or it is in earnest need and a big demand now that the world and the government need real analysts, real experts in this field. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So that is there. So a lot of the elements also is about forethought. Like we said, you're thinking ahead. When we're looking at now the convergence of the amount of technology that has come into picture, when the sense of whether we're using it to get connected or it's talking about artificial intelligence or anything, how much of an impact are you seeing, or do you foresee tech having when it comes to areas like public policy, specifically, Deevashu, for you? And so for you, primarily from when we're looking at how global diplomacy is going to work, you mentioned public diplomacy in the sense of how we are all also conducting diplomacy at our own levels when there is a cultural exchange, etc., and all of that. But how are you? I'll have Deevashu go first. How are you seeing the blending of technology coming in, impacting both these areas, both the diplomacy element as well as the public policy element? So Deevashu, over to you first.
Thank you. But I'll just take one thing first here. I'll take the policy element majorly, then how the technology. So look, I guess all of us here cannot deny that what the things or what technology was 20 years back. And I can recall my days. My presentations or my other things was all on based on it, something that I'll tell it across the 99% of the attendees were like, oh, is that was a thing across for making a presentation even. But those were those OTR sheets where I have to make those presentations, the transparency that we generally call it, compared to what today when we see the presentations and softwares or other things across, teaching across. And I'll specifically come to the last 1.5 year that COVID and pandemic has taken technology to a newer height. Nobody ever thought that this would be a way where we would be interacting. This earlier, I guess 1.5 years or 2 years back, it was me traveling to attend such sessions, to address these students out there. But look, today we can have people from across the country, across globe, attending this particular thing also. So technology and policy making, yes. Where it has eased across is like in a second, the policy reaches the place where it has to reach. So for example, we here at Jagran, when we were making a policy and very related topic to something called as transgenders and a resident welfare association, we send it within an intent that 7:30 it reached the chief minister's office, 9:30 it was sent to the ministers there, and the next day it was kept on the table for a talking purpose. And this is the Legislative Assembly that I'm talking about. So now when I'm talking for these all things, this is because of the technology, number one. Number two, I'm seeing number of questions out there, like how the technology is coming into, or what would be the prospects coming basically to the policy making, policy implementing, and the evaluation, which is the key portion which we miss when we come to public policy, is the evaluation of it. The data structures, the SPSSs, the how to combine those data, how to come out with an answer. How we see that India is at this percentage when it was COVID affected, how much percentage of the funds or the budget that was transferred across. This is how all data. Now, this took time. Census, if I'm talking about 1991, I'm not going much back, but 1991 census was done manually. Yeah. 2011 census was all on computers, and that was predicted for 2021 that it would be ready in a day with all the states together. Yeah. People used to carry it in 3 baggages, 3 trips from one state to other because the data was so high. And that is where I was coming across that, look, the constitution that was originally drafted, it was handwritten. Today, we can get that calligraphed through a font and other things. So these are just the technical sides of those. But coming on to an answer, I am sitting here, I can analyze the policy which US is working, which Singapore worked on imposing of lockdown. And we were part of here. We made a beautiful presentation to the UNICEF department here who was working with it on the sanitation during the COVID times. And we came out with an answer that India, and especially Madhya Pradesh, was one of those particular things. Swachh Bharat Abhiyan is one of those particular things where in a click of a data, you can get entire number of things. Direct benefit schemes I talked about is another example, how the policies are implemented. Now, money has to be transferred to somebody's account. Now, technology has enhanced it by leaps and bounds. I'll not even call it like by a percentage, but it's like leaps and bounds. And that is how an impact of policy or the impact of technology, not only in policy making, implementing, but also the very key portion that is of evaluating itself. So with this, I guess I'll...
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Great. That's really important. So tech is helping us being able to look at data better. It's being able to help us evaluate data better, we're making better, sounder policy. That's great. Dr. Ammourah,
I would like to contribute to what my friend, has just said and to this question. When we come to diplomacy affairs and also this technological, as you know, traditional diplomacy has been conducted by men, by individuals. Professional diplomats, very limited in scope, limited in domain, person-to-person diplomacy. And that's why decisions in that diplomacy and even the outcome of that diplomacy was restricted to some extent by going one diplomat, ambassador or so on, go to see the Minister for Foreign Affairs or any ministers. But he has no chance and no opportunity to contact with the people. But diplomacy and foreign affairs is to project the best image of your country through your behavior, through your persuasion of others in also collecting the data. So you had limited influence. But with this new high tech and technology, again, this has become very important. So in our fast changing world, stemming from the 3 revolutions, that is technology, communication, globalization, and so on, and particularly, I repeat again, media-based diplomacy, we have shortened the time, the scope, and so on, and we have been able to reach out to a wider public opinion.
Yeah.
This has shifted the conduct of diplomacy to a wider world interaction, empowering a state to influence public opinion worldwide to adopt certain concepts. This fact is indispensable, which drives the students of diplomacy and international relations involving analysts, think tanks, of all data-based information on economy, on geopolitical resources. Very recently, I read a book, A Global Diplomacy in the 21st Century, where I found it is like a fiction, like Hollywood, scientific fictions, etc., the Star Wars and so on, which if you believe in it, you will see that the whole world is going to change from geopolitics, from interest, that, it was said that he who controls the ocean will win the next war, or who will control oil will again control nation. And then Kissinger came and said, he who controls oil and people, he put the word people. Why? This is out of experience, because you can occupy a country, you can control it, but this you are not going to last, because the people will react, will revolt, will resist, etc. And that new idea, came to control the people. How to control the people is to make them change their mind. How to do it? Here you have this technology and so on. Now, so these digital resources to take accurate decision, helping on the decision makers in the state. So discussion on this will be really very interesting, and the students in your applicant will be real of interested in this, and they will get benefit. Conflict resolution, for example, it has traditional, and now it has become multifaceted, third party, etc., direct proxy. By the way, when the Israelis came in 2008 for resuming the peace talks, they went to Erdogan and asked them that they wanted to resume peace talk with Syria. Oh, that's after a long time. But Erdogan came to President Assad and told him, he said, okay, but on one condition, we will start indirect talk. Indirect talk. So this means, and there are specific agenda to be followed. If it was agreed, then we will move to direct talks. And this is, it's a long story. Actually, my book was on this. And then they came from indirect to proximity talks, even, the play on words and on terms and so on. Proximity, we sit at the table, we don't talk to each other, but through a broker. But indirect talk, each one will be sitting in one room, So with this technology at the moment, now we are talking virtually to each other. Now, this conflict also, settlement, diplomatic negotiations has developed, and diplomats and the students should be really quite qualified and trained on how to use analysis of data, analysis of resolutions, and also interact in a very constructive and not destructive manner. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Why don't you just continue and let us know a little bit about the program that OP Jindal University offers, which is a BA Honors in Global Affairs. So it would be great if you could let the students know about that as well, and they would be able to then look at that. And then, of course, Dr. Shrivastava, I'll come to you right after that about your program that's there on public policy. So, Dr. Ammourah, if we could just share with us about the program that OP Jindal offers.
World affairs in general include the study of politics, economics, law, and foreign policy formulation on a global scale, mostly seen in the lens of diplomacy as a tool of implementation. Now, when actually when I was asked to join JSIA Global, School of International Affairs, what is the difference between School of international affairs and international relations. You know, I believe, to me, that they have different, you know, although they are common, but international relation is the implementation, is the studying of international affairs, analyzing it, that will either make you strike good international relations according to your affair, your interests, your cases, or not. Now, JSIA, for example, helps. Of course, it teaches degrees in BAGA, BA in Global Affairs, also MA, and also Political Science. And I understand, which we recently drafted, also a degree program in diplomacy and foreign policy, which will be launched in 2022. So JSIA keeps in mind all that concern to help the student be more informed about the interlinkages between diplomacy and world affairs. Because if you do not understand world affairs, then you cannot judge what is the relation, international relations. So that is the core interest, and that is why it is called the School of International Affairs, to open up to the world and become change maker in our global political system, focusing on why students should keep deep insight to understanding the evolving world, which means evolving affairs, global affairs, and also consequent politics. They change the politics. So change of politics is determined by the change of affairs and situation and environment, and vice versa. And also that will create a dynamic diplomacy in order to meet both situations, both in public policy and public diplomacy. So that what makes JSIA very distinctive in this vision and mission, and also improving from time to time in real world political analysis, diplomacy analysis. So I can frankly say, after 6.5 years in, the school, as a dean, as also director of the Center for Middle East Studies, teaching diplomacy in Syria and the praxis, politics in the Middle East, and also teaching Arabic. And I have learned a lot, which is very equal, if we weigh it, to the 35 years of my diplomatic career.
Right.
So this experience, which mingled this experience between academician and also practical practitioner, etc., it is really very important. And that is why you could see in JSIA there are some ambassadors, previous ambassadors, also high politicians, which their experience, they are not talking in theory, but they are talking in practice. And this makes it more credible for students of international affairs. There you are, you can learn, you can study, you can discuss and address real life issues that concerns global affairs and the global politics.
Wonderful. All right. So global affairs and global politics there. Dr. Shrivastava, for you, if you could share also about Jagran Lakecity University's BA Honors, Public Policy and Administration. What is on offer for students and what do you look for?
Yeah, so for this course that you mentioned is called as a BA Honors in Public Policy and Administration. A quick thing, that's a 3-year course spread across 6 semesters, compulsory internships. That's something that I'll come across later. This course itself is two dual things in it. Number one, it's not a plain BA thing, it's a BA Honors that would always be an advantage over a BA or normal BA and a BA honors.
Right.
Secondly, it's a combination of public policy and public administration. Now, why we very closely crafted this particular thing in combination? The reasons for the combination, that if we see even today in India, and as an Indian students, what they can pursue and how and I guess there was one very pertinent, exactly the similar question, who controls the diplomats in our country? So if it's an Indian person, and I guess Shilpa ma'am, as she was telling that she belonged to that particular family structure where she was moving ahead. So the only way to become a diplomat from our country or for our country to different countries is UPSC, and it's through Indian Foreign Services. Now, we see the UPSC clearing is that hierarchical structure where IFS is right at the top, coming across with the IAS, the IPS, and other things as to what the things across. Now, public administration is that's why kept as an important and a key element. That it should not only be the public policy, but the student should be at advantage that by the end of 3 years, by the end of 6 semesters, he can be very well equipped both towards public policy and public administration, which definitely goes in hand. Not only that, the number of gates after this course gets open is that, yes, they can pursue their course in BA in public policy. Along with, if they want, they can have public administration. They can match the syllabus. It's exactly the similar structure what the UPSC has to offer. So the 3 years or the 6 semesters, they are prepared with the public ad for clearing as one of their optionals towards the UPSC exams, which is the gateway towards being a diplomat for India and representing India to all other services. Number one. Number two is the intrinsic part. I have seen that question. There was one of those questions like, can law and international relations or law or public policy be taken together? I can give my own example. I was one who did my graduation, my 5 years BLLB, my LLM, my PhD, all in law. And then when I switched towards public policy, Jagran Lakecity University, through its School of Jagran School for Public Policy and International Affairs, is the only school in the Central India to offer this course on BA honors in public policy, and along with we offer a 2-year MA program in public policy and international affairs. Now, again, that's a combination where public policy and international affairs, questions like United Nations or the international bodies, how they can be clubbed with that public policy, can they prefer generally, they generally prefer. So even the I'll also open one new angle for my students out here, is that how the functionaries of these ministries are happening, both at the member of parliament or the member of legislative assemblies. That is also one area where these people require young fellows, and they are public policy fellows, which is required, and which is very, like, at this time, the law students, the economy students, or the sociology students are getting a part there. But with the public policy, they are always in demand, and they are getting that surpass thing over all the other students. So that's one very important key feature with the public policy course at the graduation level. And finally, I saw somebody asking me how to create an awareness. Now, awareness is something that can only be created if you are a citizen of this country. And if you wish to, I'll quote Mahatma Gandhi here. If you want to see the change, be the change in it yourself. And that particular line has brought this particular concept as well. That if you are seeing that this thing during the COVID, I guess COVID was a learning period for all of us, irrespective of which nationality we all are to, that thing brought to a change, that thing brought to many other things. And I guess teaching them is to start with your constitution, start with the civics that we all had in our schools. And that is where the policy or the concept of welfare or the welfare state comes into play. So yes, with this course, we have been intrinsic, we have components like people from the policies in the non-profit organizations or the private companies have been addressing the students live. And during this pandemic, even we have more than 22 such people addressing with such ease with all the students. That helped us in framing, that helped us in interning, that helped us in placing those students out there.
Wonderful. Yes, sir.
Yeah, actually, this is very interesting, and I take this opportunity also to elaborate more on what JSIA is planning to launch. That is BA honors in diplomacy and foreign policy.
Okay.
Which is again 3 years, 6 semesters, where students will be, of course, introduced to the centric of how to implement foreign policy, which is
Okay.
foreign policy in the interest.
Mm-hmm.
It is rather than, it will have some basically on a practical issue. That is report writing, for example. It is very important. If you want to work in international organization, regional organizations, Ministry for Foreign Affairs, or in a company or civil servant, you have also to know how to report to your boss. What are the criteria? How is to do? How to collect data and information that is concerned with your task that you are doing. Again, there is, again, how to hold the conference, how to manage a conference. You may be, how to negotiate, how to put your proposal, how you serve this. This is more than theoretical, but a
Yeah.
practical.
Yeah.
And that would mean also, let's hope, again, by then, that is fall semester 2002, that the lockdown is over. There will be students will have a seminar, will have also a workshop. They will visit the embassies, international organization, regional organization, see with their own how, as if they are employees
Mm-hmm.
of this, the different, how they will meet the media. Again, you see, because a diplomat without a media is not a diplomat.
Yeah. Yeah.
He is just a dumb and so on at this time. Diplomat should never say to to TV interviewer or so on, no, there must be something vicious in saying. On the contrary, it is your chance. So, but if you go there and you make a mistake, that is deadly mistake. And that's why this actually is going to train students properly how to prepare, how to do it, and they will have actual also video and so on. In other words, we can expect, and from my experience, I am really, for example, yesterday I finished correcting all the end term exams, etc., and two of the students were excellent. I was astonished. I learned from them. They were so training a student on how to do the job perfectly in a course, in a degree, will open up the door for your future career if you aspire to work for your ministry of foreign affairs or public relations in companies, in regional organization, international organization, to be trained to be an international diplomat, that you represent humanity and international system. It is very ambitious, very courageous, and well designed, and that would be the marketplace, the marketplace now, the force, the workforce now is in big demand of this, because even many embassies and ministries for foreign affairs now are training. There will be training program, there will be, that is again, you understand policy, you understand the global affairs, you understand it. But if you don't know how to do it, that it becomes on paper. So you
Yeah.
have equal balance between designing strategy, understanding, and implementation. And that is what is the core and aim of diplomacy, and also the benefit of diplomacy if it is well done, transparent, open, dynamic, and constructive. You see, if we change the constructive with the C with a D, it becomes destructive. No, I insist on constructive diplomacy that will save the world from more disputes, that will ensure peace, stability, development, and welfare for all nations.
Yes, well, inshallah, that's what we will move towards and go towards. That is definitely there. So I would like to be able to just kind of wrap up now, and I thank both our speakers. Thank you very much for sharing your views and for the insight that you've given us on what is required. So what I would like to say to sum up is, A, that both the areas, both public policy as well as diplomacy and government affairs, government relations or international relations requires new students to be taking part in this. In your background is not the important element. What you want to do with the information to take it forward, to make an impact, and you can make really an impact on a highly global level with what you do today. So that's the major thing. And technology, critical thinking, being able to look at data, being able to understand where you're coming from, and see what your impact is going to be in the long run is it's what it's all about. So feel free to write into us. Please write into our speakers as well in case you have any questions for them specifically. Go to the college websites and have a look. Thank you for taking the time to join us today to talk about this very exciting spaces. Both of them are very exciting areas. And Soumya, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you to all the panelists and our participants. Just summing it up, in terms of streams, we can pursue career in diplomacy, global affairs, public policy from any stream. So there's no restriction. And I had a question regarding how to build your profile for diplomacy. So participating in MUNs, debates, writing research paper, working actively on data and policies can be really helpful. Thank you so much, participants. Please write to us at hello@mindler.com for any queries related to your careers. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you
So
for
much.
giving us this a chance to talk, and I hope we will have another session, which is really very interesting.
Yes, we will. We look
Definitely.
forward to it. Thank you so much. Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Take
Regards
care.
to
Thank
Ammourah
you.
also. Thank you so much.